and that's going to drive me crazy. Viewing those people coming in and out. I don't know what to tell you. My name is Chris Ard. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. And golly, just what a crowd to follow. This is not fair. I just got to say, I mean, it was so good to see some of you guys. I hadn't seen Mike in ages, and got a chance to say, it's just this was so nice to share podiums with folks I've shared with a million times, and I'm delighted to be here and share a few things with you as always. Anytime I share, folks, I want to mention I'm going to share my experience, and my experience may be different than anybody else's, and something that along the lines that what Peter was just talking about. Any of y'all that heard me back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was a bit of a firebrand. I was pretty rigid, and if I could go back and change that, I would. Over the years, you just kind of learn some things and learn to be. You can say the same thing without pissing off half a room, and it's just, I don't know. We all went through it. I watched Mark go through it. Everybody at a certain point, you realize. I came to the realization quite a while ago that the most middle of the road knucklehead out there loves AA as much as I do. And guys, everybody's path may be a little bit different. I am. I'm pretty poignant because I nearly died sitting in the rooms of AA. So it's part of my story, and I'm not saying that to be critical of anything or anyone, but I'll visit about it a little bit. I got to tell you, this time last week, I was in Akron, Ohio. I got to do a little workshop for the Akron Intergroup last week, and it was pretty cool. I got to speak at Founders, and we couldn't be there in person, so I said, let's do a little workshop sometime. And of course, they took, they called my bluff, and we got to do it. And so, little story Friday night, and then a workshop on Saturday, and then it was funny because it was my AA birthday. I was November 13th, 1987. I had 34 years. It was kind of cool to be able to sit in Akron, the birthplace of AA, and celebrate your AA birthday. It was. I couldn't have planned it that way, guys. I assure you, I didn't plan it, and it was the way it was. But the next day, we got on a little history tour out there in Akron, and snowing like a son of a gun. And we were out there going around the sites, and got to stand in the Gate Lodge. I'd been to the Gate Lodge before, but I'd never been in it. And I actually got the chance to go in and stand in the library where Bill and Dr. Bob had their first meeting, and they have their original furniture back in there, so you can see the seats where they actually sat. And I don't know, that stuff just amazes me. You start thinking about it, guys. What was it, 86 years ago? These guys got together, and because they, were so divinely guided, I'm alive today. Because I got to tell you, I was heading for the toilet, and heading for the toilet quick in November '87. And I'm forever grateful for that. And I also came away from that trip with a renewed sense of responsibility towards our fellowship. And I've made every mistake you can make in Alcoholics Anonymous. I guarantee you that. And I'm going to continue to try to do the very best I can not to make those mistakes, and to try to continue to carry a message that's clear and straight out of the book. And because I believe that responsibility is laid at our feet. And good news is we all get to do it a little bit different. So, my story, I actually live in the Hill Country. I live up in Ingram, Texas. I still live in the same town where I lived when I first met Mark. And I was a professional chef for a bunch of years, ended up in North Texas. I was married, and tried to save a marriage. I went to, this was early 80s. I tried to, I was really done with the alcohol, folks. It was just not fun anymore. But it was one of those deals. So many people don't understand. When I stop drinking, I get worse, not better. And I never understood until years later, working with Mark, put the verbiage to that, what that was about, that spiritual malady that we talk about. But I went to came home, had a pushing match with my wife, and made a commitment that I wasn't going to drink anymore, begged her forgiveness, and went to AA the next day. And nicest bunch of folks you ever come across, and a lot of one-liners and a lot of, and I ended up, I don't know, a week and a half later, drank, and that marriage was over. And I spent the next 7 years in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I knew intuitively that it was the place to be, folks, because I could see people getting sober in those rooms. I knew they were getting sober, but I wasn't having much luck with it. And I just, y'all know the drill. I'd stay gone for 2 months and I'd get drunk and make a debacle, and I'd go back in, sit in the rooms with my arms folded, waiting to be offended again, my only grinder is that the rooms that I was in, folks, it was back in the day, nobody was carrying big books in there. And I've talked to lots of old timers back in the day that talk about the same thing. I'm sure that within a walking distance, there were other groups where they carried big books and they talked about the solution. I didn't know that. I've said it from a million podiums in my 34 years, folks. What makes us believe that the newcomer is going to know the questions to ask? Even if they've been to treatment, they don't know. They can walk in and they're just lost, and they don't know. And in and out. They tell those stupid war stories, and I can't relate to the war stories because I'm not doing the crazy stuff y'all are doing. And I'd leave again. I'm not like y'all. I knew something was wrong, and I'm seeing a doctor, and I'm on all kinds of medications, and I'm going to counseling and therapy. And guys, you can't be this unhappy and not have something wrong. It's just that simple. And I tried to commit suicide in November 13th, 1987. And I believe God intervened in that little attempt, and I made myself sick and made a promise that I'd go back to AA the next day. And I did. And it was so funny. I got to tell you guys, there was a piece of equipment that I've never seen break. It never broke since, but that day it broke, and I was tied up on it and couldn't go to the meetings. I was running late, and I couldn't go to the meetings I'd been going to, and which turned out to be a blessing, because I ended up going to another meeting I'd never been to, but I knew where it was. And I don't know, God tell me it was a big book meeting. And I walked in those doors, folks, and they were all carrying big books. And they went around the room that night. They all knew me from North Texas, and they all went around the room and they shared some hope with me. They talked about how their lives had changed as a result of working the steps. And there was nobody telling me stupid war stories, trying to scare me into recovery, and which I was grateful for. And on the way out the door, these two old guys got around me, and they opened a big book, and they showed me the first pages of the book and the doctor's opinion, and page on 24 where it talked about the mental obsession, and they qualified me. Some of the other speakers, I think it was Marty, somebody mentioned it, that the first time I was ever qualified, 7 years in AA, and nobody, you're an alcoholic if you say you're an alcoholic. That's just not true. You're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous if you say you are. That's true. But you got to have certain symptoms to be one of us. And this is why Bill Wilson, over and over in the big book, I think like 4 times, he talks about the different kinds of drinkers. Remember the moderate drinker, the hard drinker, but what about the real alcoholic? Guys, let me tell you, AA is chock full of hard drinkers. There's a lot of people in AA that don't have to do what we have to do. And I'm looking through these pages, all these wonderful people here. I know so many of y'all. I've seen you at conferences and meetings and stuff, places we've been, and our paths have crossed. And it's so good to see you. A lot of people don't have to do what we have to do. And that's just perfectly okay. But I was freaked out. I went home that night, and the first time I understood that I was an alcoholic. I'd called myself that for years, but it was the first time I actually believed that I was. And these old guys helped me understand that if I would work these steps quickly, like the book talked about, that I could have a spiritual experience and recover, just like Mike said. And the obsession would go away, and I'd be set in a different spot. And I did, folks. 2 weeks later, I've got a completed 4th step, ready to do a 5th step. And these guys are showing me the disciplines of 10, 11, and I've had a spiritual experience. I sat on the tailgate of my truck, and it dawns on me that the obsession's lifted somehow in there. I've seen people, thousands of people, folks. I've worked in the treatment business forever as a clerical worker. I watched thousands of people sit in treatment and have spiritual experiences. These old guys sitting in meetings telling you can't have a spiritual experience for years. That's just somebody's stupid opinion. That's okay. About opinions. So you can have them. And I did. I was changed, folks. And I'm going to tell you, I had a spiritual experience, and that obsession lifted. And 5 years later, I ended up, I got married and ended up back here in the hill country where I grew up. And I walked into this old smoky club over there. Guys, this is back in the day when you could smoke in meetings still, right? And this big old club it looked like a barbecue pit when you walked in the door. All that smoke would boil out, and it was like smokers in there with 15 cigarettes in their mouths. And I walked in and I heard this guy laughing across the way. This big old, Katie Parker, imitated him perfectly earlier. That big old laugh from his toenails. And Mark Houston was over there talking trash to somebody, laughing his butt off. And he shared in the meeting, buddies, and he talked about the work and he talked about what was happening with him. And I got to tell you, it was pretty powerful. I watched him for a few weeks, guys. I just paying attention and finally asked him to sponsor me. And it was 1993, guys. And he was working at a treatment center out here. And he's the one that hired me in 1993 to do clerical work. I worked in his little alumni department, and I was really blessed, folks. For 17 years, he was my sponsor, and for most of those years, well, I can't say most of them, about half those years, we worked together, and so I got to see him every day, and I got to watch. It became real clear to me real quickly that his feet were doing what he was saying he was going to do. I'd come across a lot of people, guys, that would talk a mean game, but they weren't doing much as far as the other stuff. And he continued to talk so much about the things that we were supposed to be doing. And golly, he was the first one that started talking to me about the spiritual malady. And I guarantee he's one of the first ones that showed me the bedevilments on page 52, this internal stuff that goes on with me when I'm not drinking. See, so many people out there, they're still unclear. They believe if I stop drinking, that treats alcoholism. Alcohol treats alcoholism. You take the alcohol away from me, I get worse, not better. I come unglued at the seams. And that's why more of us try to off ourselves in sobriety than we do out there drinking, is that we're just not happy. And you're not going to be if all you're doing is sitting in, well, I can't say that. If you're an alcoholic of my variety, like Bill talks about, just go into meetings and listen to a bunch of one-liners is not going to do it for you. There's actually has to be some things accomplished. Every one of the other speakers that spoke before me have shared the same thing. This entire thing is about action. It's not about quoting the book. It's not about reading. It's not about how many meetings you go to. It's about the actions that you're taking. The spiritual program of action is what Mark truly clarified in my little life. It was, he used to talk about, somebody else said it earlier, this I smell more. It was so, because I got to tell you, back in the day, in the early 90s, guys, when we got together, I mean, we were in a land, because there's treatment centers all over this area. This is a big recovery community, and there's 1,000 meetings down in here. And we were in a sea of middle of the roaders. And I'm saying that with all love and respect, but these are a lot of people up there that were just saying over and over, if you haven't drank today, you're having a successful day. You're a winner, but you haven't drank today, but you're thinking about suicide. There's a problem. Mark understood. Somebody mentioned it earlier. 9 years sober, ended up in a psych ward in Houston. He didn't drink, but he was going crazy because he had stopped doing the disciplines, what we've been talking about all afternoon. He stopped doing all of that, and had to get back in the trench and start doing service and start doing inventories. And we come from a sponsorship lineage, folks. Joe Hawk sponsored him, Don Pritz, Paul Martin, wonderful man. God dang, Gary, my sponsor now, Gary B up in Indianapolis, and on up the deal. Tom Powers and Bill Wilson. I mean, we got this all pretty straight. These folks were all doing the work quickly, and they were all getting excited and trying to go help somebody else. That's what this was about. It still amazes me how many people can't quite figure out how this thing. I'm going to read something to you real quick. This is in a letter that Bill Wilson wrote in 1966. So this is about 5 years before he passed away, about 31 years after his last drink. This is why freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of AA's 12 steps is the sole purpose of the group. If we don't stick to this cardinal principle, we shall almost certainly collapse. And if we collapse, we cannot help anyone. Did y'all see that word, sole purpose? It didn't say one of our purposes. It says we have a responsibility to do one thing. And that's carry that message to the newcomer. I'm so grateful, guys. I got to say it. I can't share it from the podium without saying it. I'm so grateful that everybody in my sponsorship lineage, there was a guy named Don Smith. He's passed away, and I loved him to death. He's my first sponsor. And he left the fellowship after a while, and we lost him down the stream. But he's the one that understood this, guys. And Phil P sponsored me, and then Mark, and all of these folks, guys, the old timers that got around me, didn't spend a minute telling me what I couldn't do. They didn't spend any of this, not a second telling me all the dogma and the nonsense that makes us look cultish. They didn't do any of that nonsense. They said just exactly what Peter was talking about in a very gentle but very direct way. This is what we do. But if you want to change, I don't mean just not drink today. If you want to recover and be taken to that position of neutrality, then there's some things that you're going to have to do. And it's like anything, any bad medicine that you got to take, guys. If you take it quick, it's better. If you got to drag it out forever, it's painful and it doesn't work. I watch a lot of people leave treatment, guys, and the ones that get excited and jump in both feet, they do great, seems like. The ones that drag their feet and are hesitant to engage, they drop like flies because that little window of opportunity is closing. And the deal is, it's just important to find a good fellowship of a bunch of little thumpers. And that's what we did. I got to tell you, I was here for a short period of time, and the group that we were in, we separated a little bit. We started our own group. We wanted a big book group. We wanted a place where we were going to talk about the literature. All the topics were brought straight out of the big book. And I still go to a meeting similar to that today. We started about 26 years ago after Mark had left town, and we started a meeting. And if you want to come to our club, then you can do it. It's fine. But the format has got to be involved with the big book. It's got to be a literature base. You can't there's lots of meetings out there where you can go talk about your dead cat. There's not too many meetings where we can talk about the literature and show the folks what we really want to do. Nothing wrong with dead cat meetings, guys, please. I'm just saying, I don't want to make a steady diet of that. It's not going to keep me sober. So Mark was clear. He got this stuff, I guarantee you, from the writings of Paul Martin. If any of you guys want his articles, I've got them. I can email them to you. And there's a little book. They published a little book with his articles in there. And these are all grapevine articles that he did back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. But he talked about the problem with trying to live off a spiritual experience I had 20 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 34 years ago. Guys, I don't want to live off a spiritual experience I had back then. We watch a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous do that. I want to have a spiritual experience. I had one last weekend, barn burner, standing in those historic sites in Akron, Ohio. I mean, and being around in a room full of big book thumpers, all carrying big books and all talking. It was talking about a club. Yeah. Talking about the fellowship you crave. Yeah. I get people all the time. I got to say it, guys. I'm watching that clock close, but I got to say it. People all the time, I was going to call you, but I didn't want to bother you. You need to understand this little skinny one-eyed guy is 34 years sober because people bother me all the time. God. Guys, we're not going to do this by ourselves. I got to tell you, 2 years ago, when we closed the world down, and all the meetings in the area shut down because of the virus stuff. And it was nasty down here in the hill country. And we were closed for a while. And a lot of people out there that I got to watch, I ain't going to get on those stupid Zooms. I did because somebody asked me to speak. And I finally got a 17-year-old to show me how to work Zoom. And because that's what us old bastards do. And, what? Was it awkward? Yes. Did I make mistakes? Yes. I still do. That stupid mute button, it never works when I want it to. It's okay. I'm surrounded by men and women that love me, and they're going to hold me accountable, and they're going to stay close. And we're all on this goddamn path together. And it makes everything. I'm going to tell you, watching Mark in the early days when we got together at work, and he started doing these workshops with Joe Hawk around the country. And I'm going to just tell you this real quick. I said this at his funeral too. Some of y'all, I know as Big Book Thumpers, y'all taking some heat from somebody. There's always somebody that wants to make a joke at our expense, you know, and always somebody's going to take a shot at the big book folks. In certain parts of the country, it's worse than others. And I got to tell you, I'm so sorry. The miracle happens in the trench with us. The miracle happens when we're out there helping other alcoholics. But you know, the flack that he took, I'm going to tell you folks, there's some evil people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm talking about to the letter of the law, service junkies that want to split hairs with everything you ever did, guys. It's the letter of the law or the spirit of the law, you know. And I got to tell you, there was people out there taking shots at him 24/7, you know, and he'd laugh it off, and I know it hurt him. But he'd take a big old breath and smoke another carton or two of cigarettes, and God dang it, bless his heart, and he'd jump right back out there and start and go again. Never said no to any opportunity to get out and share some hope. And he'd drive into San Antonio 60 miles to go to some of these little meetings where they didn't have a lot of light in them, and he'd go in there with his big book and come back with half a dozen sponsees. You know, he was just he was the big one for doing the work in a group of us, and it was the bomb. No, he wasn't perfect, that's for sure, but boy, I got to tell you, he never once didn't have time to sit with me if something was going on. And he loved my wife, Patty, and he was there when we got married. And I don't know. He was such a good guy. I was doing a workshop in Montana. There was a Friday night speaker, and I had just got a flip phone. Y'all remember those, some of you little flip phones, you know, and not like I have an iPhone. Yeah, it's an old one, but I've got one. Oh, look, Marty's got one. Oh my God, you are so old. I know. I'd had this little flip phone. Anyway, I started, as this talk's going on, it's buzzing, and I'm looking down, and I'd heard that Mark had been in Houston on vacation, and he had started Mark Houston Recovery, and things were going good, and he just things were really good in his life, and he had a new little girlfriend, and he was happy. And they'd taken him to the hospital. They hit the carpet, and they'd taken him to the hospital. And before this folk had there in Montana had finished the talk, I was getting texts that he had passed away. And I spent the night texting and talking to people on the phone that were there. He lived for a while at the hospital, and then he passed away. It was stomach aneurysm. And the smoking got him, guys. I'm just going to say it. You can do what you want to go do, but the smoking got him. And he was as healthy as he could be, guys. He lifted weights. What a specimen of a man. I mean, good looking guy. And but he just wore out. And I don't know. It was pretty tragic. And a few weeks later, I got my sponsor. I had to ask Gary if he'd take me on, and I wanted to keep somebody in the same lineage so I'd know where we were. And I don't know. I still, to this day, there's not a week goes by that I don't get calls from people wanting to know about Mark, and, you know, wanting connections to articles he wrote, or, you know, notes that he took. And I mean, he was such a blessed guy. And I got to tell you, a lot of those people, after he passed away, and the following August, I went to work at his place to try to keep it open, and they had sold it to somebody else, and it's a big old concern now. It's a big old fine facility there in Manor, Texas, and they do a really good job still. But you know, his legacy lives on in that spot, and he helped a gazillion people, and every bit of it was laughter. Every bit of it was that big old deep laugh of his, and he didn't have a mean bone in him. I never saw him get mad at anybody, folks. But he could be really direct when you were messing up. With a smile on his face, he could cut you pretty good and tell you how the cow ate the cabbage. And I'm so grateful that I was surrounded by people like that. And I don't know what to tell you except this, and I'll end with it. You know, he was one of the first guys that talked to me about spiritual warfare. I was raised in the church, folks, and I've spent a lot of time away from it, but I've the spiritual path, it was really clear that this was all about God and what we were supposed to be doing. You hear people in AA all the time, you don't want to talk too much about God, you might scare off the newcomer. Mark just laughed. He said, what, if the solution is God and we don't want to talk about it, why are we even here? It's just like, we're not trying to jam anybody about our beliefs, but, let's talk about that spiritual path, because it's open and roomy and there's room for everyone there. But he talked about this spiritual warfare, folks. He said, Chris, one time he said, Chris, when you got sober, it was important that you stayed spiritually awake. Is that right? And I said, absolutely. Thank God for the steps. And I got connected. And yes. He said, you need to understand that it's more important now that you stay awake so that you can stay on this path with us. Yes, awake but asleep. He talked a lot about it. But the spiritual warfare he said, it's that voice in your head. Because there was coming a time people started asking me to speak, and I wouldn't do it. Because I am the single shyest guy in the place. Y'all all laugh when I say that, but it's the truth. Those of you in the room that know me know I'm shy as can be. But he said, Chris, you're not helping anybody by doing this. If you got a message, they're asking you, you need to get your butt up there and do what you're supposed to do. And stop listening to the voice in your head that tells you you're worthless and that you can't do anything. You're not. You can do this. And he got me up there, my first little speaking deal up in North Texas. And then, and his risk, I've been able to travel the world and shared the podium with a bunch of y'all in this room over the years. And what a blessing that's been. But I can still hear Mark talk about, because every once in a while he'd just stop, he'd slow down in the parking lot of the AA group, and he'd slow down and he'd unroll his window down there and he says, hey, Raymer, you staying spiritually awake today? And he'd laugh that big laugh and he'd roll it back up again, flick a cigarette butt out the window, he'd roll the window back up, and he'd take off down the road. He's laughing the whole way. Yeah. And that's what I try to do with the guys I'm sponsoring. Guys, it's not me trying to stay sober one stupid day at a time, ever. It's about staying spiritually awake a day at a time. We live life like this. And don't think for a second that you have any idea who God's going to use to help you. And don't think that you have any idea who you're going to help. If you'll suit up and show up and do exactly what these other speakers have been sharing so beautifully all afternoon long, and get in that meeting and be of service and keep an eye on the door for that little newcomer looking down at the floor, scared to death. Go over there first and see if he's got a big book, because I don't assume he's got one, and sit with him and let him, don't just pat him on the butt, tell him to keep coming back. God, I wish I could get rid of that phrase. We want you to stay. I'm just saying. Grab hold of him and make sure that he sits down next to you and you can answer the questions. They don't know if it's coffee costs money, or how much a big book is, or what are they doing? Are we going to stand up? We sit down, fight. They don't understand what we're doing. Show them. Then they'll come back. And our membership will continue to grow. Because I'm going to tell you, folks, it's the only game in town. Alcoholics Anonymous is the answer. I don't care what anybody else out there says. I don't care what articles coming down the pike saying that AA doesn't work. It absolutely does work. When we do the things that the book is asking us to do, it's infallible. You can't not get well. And I'm so blessed to be here. And Allie, thanks for asking me. And what an honor to share the podium with these nice folks. And buddy, I'm in Ingram, Texas. If any of you guys ever need me, we'll holler. And I hope I see y'all at the world famous Outpost Recovery Club sometime here. And we meet on Tuesdays and, Monday and Wednesday nights. And we'd love to have you. So thank y'all very much.